And welcome back. Keep those alarms coming in. You can still get us at K24 TV across all social media platforms. If you want to SMS, you can do that as well. Our line is 21222. Right now, it's time for us to get through our newspaper review. Let's look at the big stories of the day. We'll start off by looking at our headlines on the front pages of the dailies and then dig a bit deeper as always. Front page of the PD, shortage of drugs looms over corona. Pharmacists ask government to explore new manufacturers of essential medicines after imports from India and China hit by global virus outbreak. That's a key story, of course, being followed not only in Kenya but across the globe as far as this disruption in supply chain is concerned. And it's a story that's front and center in your copy of the People Daily this morning. Also, on the front page of the PD, Senator Murkomen says Ruto now DP without portfolio. Senator essentially claims that the besieged country's second in command no longer oversees critical state functions. Says that they'll actually even take this to the president as well to find out what really is going on. We'll be discussing this political implication as well in your copy of your PD. Also, front page of the PD, leaders mourn Msambweni MP Suleiman Dori, 42, who succumbed to cancer at Coast Hospital yesterday and was buried in Kwale. This story broke, of course, yesterday right here on the show, and we covered it, of course, as well right here on K24 This Morning. Excuse me. Moving on to the Daily Nation now. Front page of the Daily Nation, handshake, peacemaker or con game. Leaders promise to end political animosity and ethnic violence. 2 years after President Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga shook hands and announced a 9-point agenda, their allies say a strategy is in place to ensure all items are concluded by June. The detractors, however, describe the peace pact as the greatest political lie. That's a story that's being followed up as well, even as various groups give their consultations, of course, and are consulted by the BBI steering committee. That is still ongoing, and it's a story that you can find in your copy of your Daily Nation this morning. Front page of the Standard, still marking 2 years after the handshake. The hands that rocked Kenya, the Standard says. The political landscape has changed drastically in the 2 years. The opposition speaks for the government, while the faction of the ruling party has become the opposition. Strange times we're living in, but such is the implication of this particular handshake right there. And they go on to give the exact dynamics of what exactly has changed, trying to look at that in your copy of your Standard this morning. In this time, it's all about matters CS without portfolio, CS Tuju, talking about an exclusive on his accident and his recuperation, of course, back in Nairobi. Tuju broke 12 ribs, 3 vertebrae, injured his head. In this exclusive, he said he survived by the grace of God, and it's a story that you can get in your copy of your Star this morning. Finally, on the front page of the Business Daily, coronavirus sets Kenya for cheaper fuel and power. Crude oil drops 25% to $33.9 a barrel after Saudi Arabia triggers price wars as coronavirus hits demand. So that's a story that you can get in your copy of your Business Daily this morning. We have a bit to discuss right here on the show, so let's get right to it as we get to my panel. Once again, I'll give them introduction as always. Starting from my extreme right, we have Mark Bichachi, political analyst. Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Very well, welcome.
Communication strategy.
Communication, that's the hat you wear on Tuesdays?
That's the hat I wear
every day. Every day,
any day, including when I'm arguing with the wife. I have to
strategizing.
Communication strategy is very important at that point.
Welcome back to the show, Mr. Bichachi. We also have Honorable Ole Sankok. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome
second time.
For the second time.
For the second time.
Yes. We also have East Africa Law and Justice Executive Director Joy Mdifo. Good morning.
Morning, Jeff.
Welcome to the show.
Asante sana.
And we have Kisumu Central MP Honorable Fred Ouda. Good morning.
Jeff, morning.
Good morning, good morning. Let's get to the front page of the People Daily. Shortage of drugs looms over corona. This was a question of when, not if, because we knew with China being hit, lots of supply chains are going to be affected in terms of disruption after all most factories in the area were closed down. Hence why we also had our emergency response task force, not only to deal with how to quarantine passengers coming in, but such instances as well. The CS has said that they're working and looking for alternative manufacturers in order to prevent a shortage of drugs and other supplies. Are they working fast enough from where you stand, from where you assess the task force as of now?
India made a decision many years back not to honor the patents that Western drug manufacturers had and set up their own drug manufacturing facilities because of circumstances such as this. Africa has the disease of obeying the white man's rules, hoping they will succeed in a black man's world. It's not going to work. Kenya now has to really consider how can we manufacture drugs locally for ourselves. It is actually, I think, quite unfair that we Africans have to depend on the West for our medication. And coronavirus has shown us that, listen, when push comes to shove and the West needs the drugs more than we do, we will be starved of medication. And so for me, yes, the task force is doing what it can in the short term, but the long-term plan has to be, how do we start manufacturing, including patented drugs, here in Africa for ourselves? That's got to be the question that we need to ask, and if we never ask it, we'll never get there. Secondly, I'd just like to remind the world and the audiences that are listening to us, there are two ways to develop. Number one, you create technology from scratch, or you go the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean route, where you copy everyone else and you develop. Now, this is, of course, against patent laws and things like that, but let me tell you, Africa is falling woefully behind when it comes to technology. Let me give you an example. All of the technology we have in terms of communication, tell me what part of it is assembled in Africa, forget about even being manufactured here.
So that's a key issue we have.
Yes, it's a problem that we have. And unless we face it, it's not just going to be drugs, it's soon going to be mobile phones, it's going to be our computers, and guess what? They will not need to fight us, they'll just switch off their masks.
Right. And if we talk about other particular issue, I want to come to Honorable Sankok as well on this, because even from a medical point of view, this probably should have been the first place we would have been looking at as a task force to make sure if our supplies are in check, because even on the best of days, we've had quite an issue with drug supply in Kenya.
I think, Jeff, that is why the president set up a task force, so that they can foresee how we can save ourselves from the coronavirus, and I'm sure currently they are on this issue. And if you can remember, Jeff, I think yesterday and Sunday, I was with the Indian community, first of all, in Narayan Sanstan celebration, and also in the celebration of the holiday, which is normally a paint holiday, where the Asian community paint themselves and celebrate. And there was the Indian High Commissioner to Kenya, and even the ambassador. And when we went there, what we negotiated was that our history of partnership and friendship with India date back to almost 105 years, when the then Prime Minister of India came to Kenya. And we reminded them that we have also recognized the Asian community as the 44th tribe of Kenya. Therefore, it's as if India is Kenya and Kenya is India, because if they are our 44th tribe, then it is part of us. Right. So we actually requested them that if the quarantine of not exporting drugs will affect other countries, but not part of them, you know, now that they are part of us, so that they can assist us in getting this drug. But I concur with what my friend has said, that sometimes necessity may actually be the mother of invention. Maybe this is the time that as a country we have to rethink of our dependence so much on the Western world, so much on the foreign countries, especially when it comes to health, when it comes to technology like even vehicles. You know, we entirely depend on them. We depend on them on mobile phones and so on. It is high time now that necessity become the mother of innovation. Right. Because we have pharmacists, trained, top-notch pharmacists, who sometimes are the ones who are manufacturing those drugs outside this country. We have the raw materials as Africans. We can just decide that if we cannot develop our own, we copy just the way there is the Asian did, the Indian did, the Chinese did. You know, Chinese almost copied everything. They copy when you manufacture a phone. They make that. There is a counter brand. If you produce drugs, augmentin, they will always produce something that look like the other. Right. The molecular formula is almost like the other. We can still do that. Joy,
I can see you nodding when they talk about, you know, now being time for us because necessity is the mother of invention. I don't want to be the pessimist here, but even when I look at a country like Kenya, for example, that's trying to brace itself for what might happen if there's a drug shortage, and you look at where we've been so far in terms of the pledges we've made, the ideas we're trying to put forward, affordable healthcare, is still part of the big four. We can see where our report card is on that. How feasible is it to actually go it alone and try and start our own drug manufacturing industry in the country?
The definition of universal health care is not everybody having an NHIF card. The definition of universal health care is the availability of health services of an acceptable or a similar standard all across the country that is as close to each individual as possible. That access is what guarantees us having universal health care. And for us to have that universal health care, we don't just need buildings, we also need personnel, and we also need medicine, because it is health. And health, eventually, you either preventing or you're curing. And if you're curing, then you need to have medicine. India has the luxury of turning off the taps on us because, as Mark said, they manufacture a lot of their own medicine. They made the decision that, look, we have so many people that if you're going to import enough medicine from Pfizer or from GlaxoSmithKline or from these other manufacturers, we will not be able to afford to do anything else with our country. And so we just decided, you know what, we will import what we can, and what we can't we'll mass manufacture for our people. We have manufacturing, guys who manufacture medicines right here in Kenya. In Cosmos and the others who you'll find in the industrial area. And as Mheshimiwa said, once you just know the molecular composition of medicine, it's a matter of just reproducing it. And most generic drugs you'll find are just as effective as the brand names. Now, what you're doing with the brand names is paying for the intellectual property. Again, there's a point that Mark said that I want to buttress. If something has already been done, it's already been made. You're not going to make a new one. It's already been made. Somebody beat you to the tape. What you can do is say, you know what, yeah, we recognize, and then you just go on and reproduce it. Why? Because we've gotten to a place as a society, what I demand of our politicians' patriotism is what I want them to also demonstrate when they go out there. Because the decision by China, for example, to copy and mass manufacture vehicles is because they recognize our people need cars and we just can't import all of them. So let's go ahead and copy some. They try and make their own, but they usually just copy. So where we've gotten, if you're going to achieve universal health care, if you're going to have enough drugs in each of our dispensaries, if you're going to have enough facilities everywhere we need it, it is something that we must consider as a society. And it's not because we do not honor people's intellectual property. No, it is because it is necessary. Right now, they have the luxury of doing this because they made that decision. We get cheap drugs from them because of that decision. Why can we not make the decision ourselves? But over and above that, we have to understand, if we listen to the conspiracy theorists, if this is something that's supposed to quote-unquote finish people, what are we doing as a defense strategy? Forget about now in terms of intellectual property or anything. Now this is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces saying, you know what, I have to protect my people. For me to protect my people, find out what does it take to reproduce that. Like the Pharaoh did. Moses becomes a snake. He tells his magicians, come on, we got to do this because we have... This is the time we have to do what we have to do to protect us, because it's not just a matter of intellectual property, it's also a matter of national defense. So I would expect more robust engagement, and I like the way CS Kagwe seems to have started. Off the bat, he seems to have fresh ideas, more practical ideas. It's not stories of locker sitting menopause. He's giving us something that is showing us that there's something being done. We need to just give him a little bit of time, and I hope that eventually we'll see such robustness, because this is a time when nobody can fault you for taking extreme measures. So let's take advantage of it and just get our foot in the door and just emancipate ourselves from this. It's almost a cartel of drug manufacturers. This is our chance, and we have the technology to do it.
Oda, we had the CS, of course, who's the chair of the task force here before the House. We had PS Kibisho as well, talking about the various measures they're taking in terms of the reaction to this particular coronavirus. PS Kibisho talking about the fact that they might not have to get all the 239 passengers from a Chinese flight to a KDF facility, but they have their contact. So they know them and they'll follow up on them. And very many Kenyans were wondering whether they should actually let that and take it as it is on face value. What was your take on that particular scenario? Because even as we deal with this, the question of those 239 and what really happened there always seems to come up to the surface every single time.
You know, Jeff, first of all, and as Kenyans, number one, we need to get out of this hysteria that every single Chinese you see around is a coronavirus person. And you see, I saw a very pathetic video, if at all it was true, whereby some citizens of this country were chasing and beating up a Chinese just because they thought he's been infected. Now, I also don't think that the Chinese government will be very stupid to let our people have been infected, 239 of them, to this country. And I thank the Chinese government, first of all, for coming out and clarifying that these people are all tested where they came from. I'm not trying to say that it was okay for them to come. But again, I'm not telling, I can't allow ourselves to be in this state of mind and think that every single Chinese is sick. Now, one, I will thank Karanja Kibicho, if at all what he said was true, that they are trying to monitor all these Chinese where they are and whatever they are doing. I mean, so far in this country, if there's any case of coronavirus, maybe Jeff, if you know one, or maybe if Joy knows one, me, I don't know one anywhere at this particular moment. That is one.
Do you think his explanation was satisfactory as PS concerning that issue? To
some extent, yes, because you cannot quarantine these people, send them back to their country, because one, we have our own trade relationship with China, and as you know, 50% of everything that's happening in this country is because of China. So definitely, just because of coronavirus, you cannot stop being friends, you cannot stop being allies, you cannot stop being partners in development. I mean, let's agree. So there are things we can do diplomatically, because we'll actually strain our relationship with other countries. That is one. Two, on the issues of the issue of drug, even as the task force takes off, because that task force definitely had to be there. Let's look at this thing. We have private companies in this country, some of them SmithKline, Beecham, and we have Glaxo and all that. Let's also, their areas must be in the line of cartels, because I also don't believe, because of corona, now we can't get drugs. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? Even in India, the cases in Italy are so high that even the ones in India. So let's think outside the box. Is it this issue of mafuta imeongezwa, so mafuta imedisappear? So because of corona, now we cannot import drugs, so that some guys can cash on it. That is one. And two, as a country, we have companies that are private that actually supply. Some of them try to manufacture, some of them import in bulk. Can't we set up a manufacturing company in this country? Because I think we really export. We really export what do you call intellectual. I mean, we've got so many pharmacists in this country who go out of this country and even work in some countries in China. I mean, we export a lot of our brain power outside there. Can we bring them back in this country and do and manufacture and do justice for ourselves and manufacture our own drugs? Those are questions as a country we should ask ourselves. But again, I would say I'll be very optimistic and say, as a developing nation, we are not the same Kenya we were 10 years ago. Because if at all corona was in this country, let's say the year 1995, to date, Jeff, I mean, about 50 of us will be dead by now. But I mean, we are going forward. So I'm very optimistic that soon and very soon, something is going to be done. The task force is going to come up with recommendations that are actually favorable and that can take us forward in the line of our own manufacturing, in the line of fighting cartels, because the drugs also has cartels, and in the line of also trying to foster relationship with more other countries so that you don't rely on China and India for this kind of whatever drug manufacturing.
We're about to go to our first break, but before we do that, quick 30 seconds to you, Joy, because there's something Oda has mentioned in terms of the trade relations you have with China, and that's why some decisions that are being made also have to be made in the light of the kind of economic partner we have there. We have judicial orders that had come straight from Justice Mativo. Take this to 39, take them to a Kaidia facility, let them be quarantined there as we follow up on that. That quite didn't happen. Are we now seeing a point where we'll have trade relations, superseding what a judge might give, a court order in that particular regard?
And I don't even think it was trade relations. It was a matter of the court order came after the horse had bolted. You know, if you had made this order before they had scattered, it would be easy to contain them and bring them back. But now on what strength? They're not under arrest. They're not on detention. There is a court order, yes, but if people, you fail to, because we have all of their phone numbers, sounds to me that they have tried to track some of these people down and have not actually been successful. So rather than owning up to the fact that I cannot find all of them, I have not physically seen all of them, I've only talked to them on the phone to say, you know what, we're in contact with them. But I do agree that the nature of the balance has to be looked at in big picture. Because, okay, between then and now we have stopped flights, we have done what? So we have sort of put that little buffer zone between us. But at that point, those ones who first came in, there was a potential of a fallout, for lack of a better word. Because the Chinese government had gone out of their way to explain, we have checked these ones out, we have done whatnot. They had tried to allay our fears. And so for us to turn back and sort of tell them, you know what, we don't trust you, is a little bit paranoid. The best scenario we had was what we have now, hoping for the best that nobody turns up and well. Okay. But in terms of the court order, in my opinion, the cat had already bolted, the horse had already bolted, and you're trying to
get it back.
Yes.
30 seconds.
Yes, the court order came almost 5 days when they are already with the general population. Surely, even the judge will have thought, because who are we to quarantine now? Was it those they have already come into contact with
other people,
or the original 239 people?
Okay.
You know, it was difficult for the government actually to go and get the 239, get their contacts. Maybe they have gone to the supermarket, get all the supermarket guys who shopped that day, take them to KDF.
Okay, of course we're going to take a break on that particular point. When you come back after the break, Sankok, is Jubilee still intact? You've been saying that severally on this show.
100%. 100% intact. 101.
We shall come back and talk about that after the break. On page 4 of the People Daily, Senator Murkomen, Ruto now DP without portfolio. Senator sensationally claims that besieged country's second in command no longer oversees critical state functions, and they'll take this all the way to the party leader, your president. Talk about that after the break.